أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي رب زدني علما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وأصحابه وبارك وسلم. Today we are going to start with verse number 29 of Surah Al-Anfaal, which is translated as the spoils of war, and this is the 8th surah or chapter of the Quran. So now we start with verse number 29 of the spoils of war, Al-Anfaal. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu in tattaqullaha yaj'al lakum furqanan wa yukaffir ankum sayyi'atikum wa yaghfir lakum wallahu dhul fadlil azim. O you who believe, if you remain conscious of God, He will create in you a criterion, that is, the ability to judge between right and wrong. And He will erase your faults and will forgive you. To God belongs great bounty. So this, of course, is addressed to the believers. If you remain conscious of God, that means different commentators have explained this differently. The word in Arabic is in tattaqu, that means if you become muttaqi. And mostly the word muttaqi or taqwa has been translated as being afraid of God. But there are other explanations as well, and the one I like better is to be conscious of God. And also there is another explanation, to love God so much that you are afraid of annoying Him. So if you become conscious of God, then He will create in you a criterion. A criterion is something that is the ability to judge between what is right and what is wrong. Like a touchstone. If you go to a jeweler and you take a piece of metal, yellow metal, and you say, please tell me if this is gold, and if it is, how many carat, then he will rub it on a big black stone and he will be able to tell you if this is gold and how many carats gold it is. And that sort of is a criterion. The touchstone or criterion, it tells you, or he might tell you, no, this is not gold, this is brass, so on. Here it is being said that if people are conscious of God, then God will create in them the ability to judge between right and wrong. One reason is that now you have a standard by which to judge what is right and what is wrong. Otherwise, one can just make one own standards. Some commentators have said that Amar bil Ma'ruf wa Nahi Anil Munkar is the meaning of being muttaqi. Here, especially in this verse. Amar bil Ma'ruf is to give injunctions to do the right, or tell people or command people to do the right thing. And Nahi Anil Munkar is to stop them from doing the wrong. So if they become conscious of God, that means now they will be following whatever God has instructed them to do through the Prophet ﷺ. So they will be doing Amar bil Ma'ruf and Nahi Anil Munkar. It doesn't mean that you go around with a stick and control everybody on the street, but everyone can do this to a certain extent within one's sphere of influence. And also it is said that if you are conscious of God, then He will erase your faults and will forgive you. To God belongs great bounty. Erase your faults is that, here the word used is yukaffir ankum sayyi'atikum. Yukaffir or kufr also means to cover. So that means if somebody is conscious of God and he's trying to do his best to follow whatever instructions have been given through the Prophet, then God will erase his minor faults, or He will cover them up so that no one will be able to notice his faults. And we have been doing the names of God, the beautiful names of God, and one of the names of God is Sattar, which means one who covers up or hides other people's or people's faults. So then if we become conscious of God, then He will cover our faults and yaghfir lakum, and also forgive us. Wallahu dhul fadlil azim. And God has great bounty, so He can give us anything that He wants us to. Furqan, the word that we used here as the criterion, this can also mean a separation, a division, or a discernment. Discernment is the word which is more applicable. Now, in this connection, the Sufis, who are extremely spiritually inclined, they think that zikr or remembrance of God produces kashf or a spiritual light within the heart, which helps to see the reality of things. And it's like having sharai sadar, that breast is opened up and a light enters it, and then that person is mostly concerned with God and what God has asked us to do, and he spreads light and he spreads love in the world. وَإِذْ يَمْكُرُ بِكَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لِيُثْبِتُوكَ وَيَقْتُلُوكَ وَيُخْرِجُوكَ وَيَمْكُرُونَ وَيَمْكُرُ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. Remember, those who were unbelievers were plotting against you, so that they would imprison you or kill you or banish you. They were plotting and God was planning, and God is the best of planners. Now in this verse, Yamkur, they were plotting. Makar is the word for plotting. Whenever in the Quran it is used for the non-believers, then we say they were plotting. But when it is used for God, like it says here, Wallahu khairul makirin, then we say He is the best of planners. For God, we do not say plot, we say plan. Now, after the Prophet's uncle Abu Talib died, after his death, the Prophet lost a great helper and protector. And in those days, they would take people into their protection. So he was under the protection of Abu Talib. That means if you do any harm to my nephew, then I'm your enemy. So then people would be a little careful. So after his death, the Prophet lost his protection, and now the unbelievers of Makkah, the Quraysh of Makkah, thought that now they could do anything they wanted to harm the Prophet. And also, as the followers grew in Makkah as well as in Medina, his opponents plotted to get rid of him. And first they thought of all sorts of different things, Here it is mentioned that one suggestion was that they should be imprisoned for life, where no one could see him and he couldn't see anybody, and so on and so forth. And another suggestion was that they wanted to kill him or to banish him, to send him away from Makkah. But then people who were attending that conference, Darul Nadwa it was called, where they were having this meeting, and they all had some kind of objection to each of these suggestions. They said, if you banish him, you send him to another place, then he will go there and he'll make followers, because he has such a sweet way of talking and all the things he says appeal to people. They themselves were admitting this. And they said, if you do this, then he could come up with a lot of more followers, and then again we will have an enemy on our hands. And then they said, if you imprison him, his followers are not going to leave you. They will come in a mob and they will attack us, and they will free him and take him away. So then the one suggestion that was liked by most of them was to select one young man from each tribe, and each one would come with a dagger and wait outside the Prophet's house and wait for him to go out of the house. They did not know that he was going to migrate, so they thought they would kill him when he would come out to say his prayers early in the morning, when he would be going to the mosque. So they said, if we have so many men from each tribe, then the Bani Hashim, the Prophet's tribe, will not be able to take revenge on all those tribes, and then they will just be reduced to taking the blood money, and that they could come up with very easily. So it is also said, this is said by some very authentic and respected commentators, that Iblis, when he heard of this meeting, he changed his guise and he pretended to be one of the elders of one of the tribes who lived a little far off, So they accepted him, and he also kept giving his opinion about these suggestions. And this suggestion of selecting one young man from each tribe was greatly liked by Iblis, that is Satan or Shaitan. So this is also stated by Karam Shah and other very authentic commentators. But it so happened that the Prophet was informed beforehand about what they were going to do, And he was also asked to migrate that very night and not to sleep in the bed in which he had been sleeping, but to get up and leave. And also he had some people's trust. People used to give their precious things to keep. Even though they were his enemies, they would come and say, please keep this for us. And then he would be protecting their trust. So before he left, he remembered the trust and he gave them all to Hazrat Ali Karamallahu Wajhu. And also Hazrat Ali slept in his bed. And then he walked out. And when he walked out, he kept reciting verse number 9 from Surah Yasin. And we shall raise a barrier in front of them and a barrier behind them and cover them over so they will not be able to see. So all these men are standing there waiting for him, and he walks out reciting this verse and they are not able to see him. And he walks out to his freedom. And also he had sent word to Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq that he has been asked to take Hazrat Abu Bakr along with him on his journey. And they hid in the cave of Thor for a few days, and then when the Makkans had given up their search, then they proceeded on to Medina. And it is said that when the Makkans reached the cave, because they had searched everywhere else for them, and they came to the Gharisor, the cave of Thor, they noticed that a pigeon had laid eggs in front of the cave, and they said, if this is so, then nobody could possibly have walked into the cave for a number of days. And also it is said that a spider had made its web on the mouth of the cave. So all these things happened, and the Prophet was able to migrate very successfully. Some commentators call this an exodus. For migration, they use the term exodus. But exodus, I feel, means that the whole crowd is all going out together, like Prophet Hazrat Musa alayhi salam's people, Moses' nation, they all walked behind him. But in this case, people were walking in small batches. They were going out in small batches, and whenever somebody got the chance, they left. وَإِذَا تُتْلَى عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُنَا قَالُوا قَدْ سَمِعْنَا لَوْ نَشَاءُ لَقُلْنَا مِثْلَ هَذَا إِنْ هَذَا إِلَّا أَسَاطِيرُ الْأَوَّلِينَ. And when our verses are recited to them, they say, we have heard enough. If we wish, we can also produce the like of them. They are nothing but tales of old. So there was a rich merchant of Makkah whose name was Nazar bin Haris, and he brought back from his travels a famous book called Kalila Damna and other stories of Caesar and Khusro. Now when the Prophet would recite accounts of the nations gone by, he would say with pride that he could also relate such stories and parables. This has also been stated by Qurtubi. So, like for them, there was no difference in an ordinary tale and in what the Prophet ﷺ was reciting. This person said that, and so many other people said that we can also produce the like of what he is reciting. But this challenge is alive even today. No one has been able to produce something which is equal in worth to the Quranic verses. Not even a whole chapter, but just a verse. And there are several verses in the Quran challenging the unbelievers to produce the like of the verses of the Quran. They are present in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 23, and Surah Yunus, verse 38, Surah Hud, verse 13, and Surah Bani Israel, verse 88. And once, I think in the Abbasid Caliphate, one man who's a very polished kind of poet, and he was well recognized, he said, I can also produce something like this. So he wrote down something, and then he started walking to the place where he was supposed to put it up. And then he passed by a madrasa where the young children were reciting the Quran. And when he heard that verse, that is the verse about Hazrat Nuh alayhi salam, in which mention is made of water coming from the sky and from the earth, he just stood there and he said, no, this cannot be the work of a human being. And he tore up his own paper and he walked away. وَإِذْ قَالُوا اللَّهُمَّ إِنْ كَانَ هَذَا هُوَ الْحَقَّ مِنْ عِنْدِكَ Amtir alayna hijaratan minas samai, awitna bi'azabin alim. When they said, "O God, if this Quran is the truth from you, then rain down on us a rain of stones from the sky, or bring on us a painful punishment." These are supposed to be the words of Nazar bin Haris and Abu Jahl, who were great disbelievers and enemies of the Prophet ﷺ, and they did not believe in the Quran. They of course talked about Allah, but they did not believe in what the Prophet was trying to teach them, or that he was a prophet sent by God. They said, "If the Quran is the truth from you, then rain down on us a rain of stones from the sky, or bring on us a painful punishment." So this is a very foolish thing to do. They are actually praying for punishment to be given to them. وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُعَذِّبَهُمْ وَأَنْتَ فِيهِمْ وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ مُعَذِّبَهُمْ وَهُمْ يَسْتَغْفِرُونَ. God is not going to bring down His wrath on them when you, that is Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, God is not going to bring down His wrath on them when you are amongst them. And neither is God a giver of punishment when they are asking for forgiveness. So it has been traditionally or always, whenever a nation was going to be punished to their destruction, complete destruction, first the Prophet was informed about it and he was asked to leave the place. And after he had left, then the punishment was sent on them. So here it is said that since Prophet Muhammad is still amongst them, that punishment will not come to the unbelievers no matter what they do. And also the fact that there is this belief, we believe that Prophet Muhammad is going to be the prophet till the end of time. So since he is in a way present amongst us even today, therefore this kind of punishment will never be forthcoming. And neither is God a giver of punishment when they are asking for forgiveness. Now there are several versions, several explanations for this. Who is asking for forgiveness? Some say that when people realize their mistake and ask pardon for it, their punishment is liable to be averted. Or idolaters who would be istighfar as a ritual when they were doing tawaf. The polytheists of Makkah, the Quraysh, were still doing the tawaf of the Kaaba and they were also reciting the istighfar. But their problem was that they were still also worshipping their idols. But in any case, here it is said, some commentators think that these unbelievers who were doing the istighfar, they were asking for forgiveness, then that is also a reason why the punishment was not forthcoming. Then others believed that some believers who had not migrated from Makkah yet and were praying humbly in Makkah, since they were there present in Makkah, therefore the punishment was not given to the Makkans. Another version is that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was a prophet of mercy. Therefore, the destructive punishment was averted. A fifth explanation is that after the believers had all migrated, then there was no reason for them not to be punished. But their punishment was the victory of Makkah, which they had been warned about. Because without fighting a battle, the Prophet was well prepared for a war. He and his 10,000 followers, they just walked into Makkah and not one of them tried to resist. There was a little bit of a skirmish somewhere, but that was not like a war. وَمَا لَهُمْ أَلَّا يُعَذِّبَهُمُ اللَّهُ وَهُمْ يَصُدُّونَ عَنِ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ وَمَا كَانُوا أَوْلِيَاءَهُ إِنْ أَوْلِيَاؤُهُ إِلَّا الْمُتَّقُونَ وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَهُمْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. What is the reason now for God not to punish them when they try to prevent the believers from reaching the holy mosque, even though they are not its keepers? Its keepers are none but the pious, but the majority do not understand. Now, sometimes the unbelievers would defy, such statements, and they would often say that if they were wrong, then the wrath of God should fall upon them. But of course, we believe that the prophet of mercy, therefore, they were not punished. And he is also going to be the last prophet till the end of time. And he was going to be amongst them. And as long as some people were humbly seeking forgiveness, they would not be punished. So even if some people in a place sit and keep asking for forgiveness, then the punishment of the whole nation can be averted. Now, historically we see that Prophet Yunus salam's nation is the only nation mentioned in the Quran which started asking for forgiveness before the punishment was sent on them. And their punishment was removed, and they came to believe in the one God and their prophet. And ironically, this is the nation whose prophet left them before he received orders from God to leave his people. When they tried to prevent the believers from reaching the holy mosque, because here you remember that when the believers along with the prophet, they were coming for Umrah. They came from Medina to Makkah to do Umrah, but they were stopped on the way and they were not allowed to enter the house of God, the holy mosque. What is the reason now for God not to punish them when they try to prevent the believers from reaching the holy mosque? By the way, the holy mosque, I'm sure you already know, means the whole building that surrounds the Kaaba. The surrounds of the Kaaba are known as the Masjidul Haram, that is the holy mosque. And also this question is like a rhetorical question, that what is the reason now for God not to punish them when they try to prevent believers from reaching the mosque, is because many of them were going to come to belief. They were destined to come to faith. That is why God in His infinite knowledge knew this and He was not going to destroy them. Another point comes up here. Even though they are not its keepers are none but the pious. Keepers were the people who were supposed to take care of the holy mosque and the Kaaba and its surrounds, and also they would provide water and sometimes, yes, food as well. And traditionally the Quraysh was supposed to be the keepers of the holy mosque. But now they were preventing the people from worshipping the one God and allowing the polytheists to worship their idols in that same place. So this was totally the opposite of what they were supposed to be doing. Now they claimed that they were descendants of Hazrat Ibrahim a.s. of Abraham, and Hazrat Ibrahim a.s. had reconstructed the Kaaba for the worship of the one God. But these people had forsaken his Unitarian faith, and thus, in a way, automatically, their claim to its guardianship was also lost, but they would not give it up. Its keepers are none but the pious, but the majority of them do not understand. That means only the pious people who believe in one God, who are muttaqi, and who do all the things correctly, all the injunctions that they are supposed to follow correctly, they are the ones who have a right to be keepers of the holy mosque. وَمَا كَانَ صَلَاتُهُمْ عِنْدَ الْبَيْتِ إِلَّا مُكَاءً وَتَصْدِيَةً فَذُوقُوا الْعَذَابَ بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَكْفُرُونَ. And their prayers and worship near the house of God was nothing but whistling and clapping. So over time they had changed the rituals, the manasik of performing the Hajj, which Hazrat Ibrahim a.s. and his son Ismail a.s. later they had taught the people. So now what they were doing was, in order to show their humility, they had started coming in the nude. Both men and women would come into the mosque in the nude, and they would perform the tawaf, clapping and whistling. And this is of course stated by many authentic commentators like Karam Shah, Razi, Qurtubi. Muhammad Asad says that this shows a kind of spiritual emptiness. Whatever they were doing was just for show or for some physical action, but they did not have any real spiritual soul in it. So this now, taste the punishment is for the future. They will be told, now taste the punishment because you disbelieved. And according to commentators, this punishment will be the defeat at Badr. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ لِيَصُدُّوا عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ فَسَيُنْفِقُونَهَا ثُمَّ تَكُونُ عَلَيْهِمْ حَسْرَةً ثُمَّ يُغْلَبُونَ وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا إِلَى جَهَنَّمَ يُحْشَرُونَ. Indeed, the unbelievers spend of their wealth in order to prevent people from following the way of God. They will keep on spending it until it becomes a cause of regret for them, and then they will be subdued. Those who disbelieved will be gathered in hell. So we know that the people of Makkah spent a lot of wealth in trying to fight with the believers, especially at Badr, because this was the first war, and they thought that if they were well armed, they had a lot of arms and ammunition, they even got some people, I think, in this war, mercenary soldiers from somewhere in order to fight with them. Maybe that was in Uhud, I'm not exactly sure, but they spent a lot of money to fight at Badr. And Abu Sufyan, who was the leader of the Makkans at that time, used his wealth to fight the Prophet all along. He had been doing this all along. They will keep spending it. That means they will keep spending their money. They will be just wasting it until they are subdued. Now, here commentators state that worship is of three kinds. It can be by word, prayers that we say, or the zikr that we do, that is all by word. The second is by actions, and the third is by wealth. Actions like if you are kind to somebody or you give charity and so on. Then the third type is by wealth. So they do spend their wealth, but for stopping people from worshipping God. So they are doing the opposite of worship. They are stopping people from worshipping God. Now this word, in الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا يُنْفِقُونَ, they spend of their wealth. This, some people have explained, some commentators, that after Badr, some Makkans went and met Abu Sufyan's caravan. While the caravan was still on its way, they ran to him and they suggested that they help with the wealth from the caravan and avenge the deaths of those people who had died at Badr. This is after they had been defeated at Badr. The caravan was still on its way because naturally it moves very slowly. And there are many people who are just walking along with the camels. So they ran to Abu Sufyan and they said, why don't you give us some wealth from this caravan, and then we can avenge the deaths of all our people who have died. This has been stated by Hazrat Ibn Abbas. لِيَمِيزَ اللَّهُ الْخَبِيثَ مِنَ الطَّيِّبِ وَيَجْعَلَ الْخَبِيثَ بَعْضَهُ عَلَى بَعْضٍ وَيَرْكُمَهُ جَمِيعًا وَيَجْعَلَهُ فِي جَهَنَّمَ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْخَاسِرُونَ. So that the impure are separated from the pure, and the impure are heaped over one another and are gathered together in hell. These are the people who are the losers. So the impure are separated from the pure. The commentators say that in this world, the pure and the impure all live together, and sometimes people put on such an act that it's difficult to even tell, to exactly what is going on in their mind and heart. But on the day of judgment, the pure and the impure will all be separated. And some commentators say that this also happened at Uhud, since the followers and the hypocrites were separated, and the believers and the non-believers became obvious that who are the believers and who are the hypocrites. قُلْ لِلَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا إِنْ يَنْتَهُوا يُغْفَرْ لَهُمْ مَا قَدْ سَلَفَ وَإِنْ يَعُودُوا فَقَدْ مَضَتْ سُنَّةُ الْأَوَّلِينَ. Say to the unbelievers that if they desist, they will be forgiven what happened in the past. But if they persist, then there is the example of those trespassers who went before them. So here kind of a warning is being given to the unbelievers to even now, there is still time for you to stop all the hostility and enmity and to embrace Islam. And even if they desist, like God is so forgiving that He is waiting for people to just come and say sorry to Him, just to do istighfar. And the moment they do it sincerely, then all the past sins are forgiven. Except when it's too late, when people can see their death, they can see the angel of death. And if then they start saying sorry, then it's too late, they will not be forgiven. So say to the unbelievers that if they desist, they will be forgiven what happened in the past. But if they persist, if they keep on doing what they have been doing, then there is the example of those who went before them. Example of those who went before them means all the nations who were destroyed because of their trespasses. and they are also aware as to what was the punishment which was given to the nations in the past. وَقَاتِلُهُمْ حَتَّى لَا تَكُونُ فِتْنَةٌ وَيَكُونَ الدِّينُ كُلُّهُ لِلَّهِ فَإِنِ انْتَهُوا فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ بِمَا يَعْمَلُونَ بَصِيرٌ. Keep fighting them until there is no more rebellion, and all obedience is for God alone. But if they desist, then God sees what they do. So here the instructions are given. How long are you supposed to keep on fighting? Keep on fighting them till there is no more rebellion, and the obedience is for God alone. This has been explained that when the believers have the upper hand and they have the strength and power to govern, then that means they should stop the fighting, and then also the first thing they are supposed to do after that is to establish justice. And the justice that they establish should be for everyone, whether it's a believer or a non-believer. There should be an effort made to create a peaceful coexistence. And also the Muslims are supposed to keep struggling until they are not tried in their own religion. This is the opinion of Ibn Kasir. And some people have derived this conclusion from here that the war that the Muslims fight should be a defensive war. That means they should not fight an aggressive war, they should not start the war. But if they see, the circumstances are such, then they have to defend themselves and also their religion. وَإِن تَوَلَّوْا فَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ مَوْلَاكُمْ نِعْمَ الْمَوْلَى وَنِعْمَ النَّصِيرُ. But if they turn back, know that God is your friend, the best of friends and the best of helpers. So, if they turn back, that means if they stop fighting, if the enemy stops fighting, then you should also stop fighting and know that God is your friend and He is the best friend. So just keep depending on God and not on anybody else. That means if the Muslims should keep struggling until they are not tried in their own religion. That means tried in their own religion means until they are able to practice their religion freely. But if somebody is forcing them in such a way that they cannot practice their religion, then there is reason for war. And there are other factors also which come into play. So the question is that does one have to keep on fighting until everyone starts believing in Allah? Actually, this is not really true. It is, because in so many times in the Quran, we come across verses which say like, La ikraha fid deen. That means there is no compulsion in religion. So what has to be done is when somebody says, all right, I will let you follow your own religion, and I will live, since this is a Muslim country, I will live in it as a non-Muslim. And then there used to be certain rules which they had to follow. They did not give the zakat, so they gave the jizya. And giving jizya means that they have accepted your sovereignty and they will live as peaceful members of that community. And another thing is that here Al-Razi is one of the greatest of the classical commentators. He says that this command is only for the surrounds of Makkah and does not apply to the whole world. So this command is for that time and that place. We are now starting with the 10th Sipara, that means juz in Arabic and part in English, 10th part of the Quran, and verse number 41. وَأَعْلَمُوا أَنَّمَا غَنِمْتُم مِّن شَيْءٍ فَإِنَّ لِلَّهِ خُمُسَهُ وَلِلرَّسُولِ وَلِذِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينِ وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ إِن كُنتُمْ آمَنتُم بِاللَّهِ وَمَا أَنزَلْنَا عَلَىٰ عَبْدِنَا يَوْمَ الْفُرْقَانِ يَوْمَ الْتَقَى الْجَمْعَانِ وَاللَّهُ عَلَىٰ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. Whatever you obtain from a booty is another word for the spoils of war. If you get it during the war, then it's called ghanim, and if you get it without fighting and without war, then that is fai. Now, whatever you obtain of booty, 1/5 of it is for God and the messenger and the relatives and the orphans and the indigent and the wayfarers. If you believe in God and what we revealed to our devotee on the day of the criterion, the day the two armies faced each other, and God has power over everything. Before Islam, when they had all kinds of wars before this, and then whoever got hold of whatever stuff, they just ran off with it, and there was no equitable distribution of the spoils of war. So this is the first time, and for the Bani Israelis, they were not permitted to take the spoils of war. They were supposed to collect all the stuff together and burn it up. But this is the first time that they are being permitted to take the stuff as well as to have it distributed equitably. So now the proportions of the distribution are being given here, that whenever you obtain booty, 1/5 of it is for God and the Messenger. That means, of course, the Messenger, Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, will be there to distribute it according to his own thinking or judgment. And the relatives and the orphans and the indigent and the wayfarers, if you believe in God and what we reveal to our devotee on the day of the criterion. So 1/5 the Prophet will have jurisdiction over. And that 1/5 will go to his relatives because they were not entitled to the zakat. And the orphans could be from anywhere, and the indigent and the poor and the wayfarers. Because in those days, if somebody had started traveling and he had lost whatever he was carrying, or he was, attacked by highway robbers, then they were in dire straits and they always had to be helped out. So all these categories come under that 1/5, and the remaining 4/5 will go to the soldiers who risked their lives and their everything that they had, and they came into the field to fight. Question is, this statement here that 1/5 is for God and His Messenger is at the time when the Prophet was alive. And after he leaves the world, then what happens to this 1/5? We were going to come to that later, but since the question has come up, we can answer it now, that after the Prophet, when Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq became the first Khalifa, the first vicegerent, he said that I had heard the Prophet ﷺ say that the Prophet's inheritance is only during his lifetime. He has a say in, whatever he has, he can give it to anybody he pleases. But after him, the people who have been getting that share are not entitled to it. His heirs are not entitled to his wealth or whatever he had left. For example, if you say in the Quran, we read about Prophet Dawood alayhi salam, David, and his son Suleiman, and he inherited his wealth and his kingdom. I'm saying that Hazrat Suleiman alayhi salam inherited from his father, but they say that this was not because he was the son that he inherited, but he was capable of being a ruler. That is why he was extremely intelligent, and he was capable of being a ruler. That is why he had been appointed the next king. Now, the Khalifa is taking the place of the Prophet, then does he inherit, or does he inherit the power or the right to distribute for that 1/5? No, he does not. So this thing does not hold good after that. But the Caliph has the power to distribute it equitably, like he can give it out to not for his own relatives, but he can give it to the poor and the orphans and all these people. Is antum bil udwati dunya wa hum bil udwati al-quswa wa rabbu asfala minkum wa law tawatum lakhtalaftum fil mi'ad walakin liyaqdi Allahu amran kana maf'ula liyahlika man halaka an bayyinatin wa yahya man hayya an bayyinatin wa inna Allaha lasamiyun alim. Recall, if you had fixed a time when you were on the near side of the valley and the enemy was on the far side, with the caravan below you, you would have remained behind schedule. But this spontaneous battle was so that God would show you what had to happen, and so that the one who had to perish would do so with obvious evidence, and the one who had to live would do so with proof. God is the ever-hearing, the ever-knowing. When the believers started out from Medina, they had no idea that they were going to face a force which would be 3 times their size. They thought they would be attacking the caravan carrying about 50,000 pounds worth of goods in those days. And they thought they would be greatly compensated for all that they had lost when they had migrated from Makkah. They had left everything behind. But they were confronted suddenly by the enemy and they had no choice left but to fight. And the caravan of Abu Sufyan was below them on another path, and they were suddenly faced by this force which the Makkans had sent to fight with them. Now this was happening because that is the way God wanted it to happen. Because this is the first war they are fighting with the unbelievers. And if they win this war, then they will be able to establish the strength of their faith by showing that such a small number of handful of people could defeat, and actually not just defeat but rout an army which was 3 times their size and which was also very well equipped with all the arms and ammunition. And here it is said was so that God would show you what had to happen. That means God had already decided what was going to happen, and this had to come to pass. That would be the ultimate result. Who had to perish would do so with obvious evidence. What is the obvious evidence? It could be that an apparently weak and small army could defeat a large and well-equipped army merely by their strength of faith. And the believers died conscious of dying as martyrs and shaheeds because they had gone prepared to fight as martyrs, and when a martyr dies and when they are dying, they know they are shaheed. And the ones who survived were conscious of God's hand in it. They knew that we alone could not have done it. God has helped us. While the unbelievers died for nothing, those who survived realized that there was some other force working behind the courage of the Muslims. This is the opinion of Muhammad Asad. Now, I'm going back to the division of the spoils of war because there was a question about it. Here, Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq said that he had heard the Prophet say that the Prophet can give to relatives during his lifetime but not after. So the point of the relatives is taken out from this division and the others remain. And all the remaining 3 Khulafa Rashideen, the rightly guided caliphs, that is Hazrat Umar, Hazrat Usman and Hazrat Ali, they all followed this rule said by Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq because he said this is what the Prophet had said. Is antum bil udwati dunya wa hum bil udwati al-quswa wa rabbu asfala minkum walau tawatum lakhtalaftum fil mi'adi walakin liyaqdiya Allahu amran kana maf'ula liyahlika man halaka am bayyinatin wa yahya man hayya am bayyinatin wa inna Allaha lasamiyun alim. Recall if you had fixed a time. As we read most of this, you were on the far near side of the valley and the enemy was on the far side and the caravan was below you. And if you had fixed a time, with the other party, then you would have remained behind because they had sent a quick, well-equipped force to meet them on the way. So this was a spontaneous battle, and of course they had to fight till the end. And when you know that do or die, we have to fight till the end, then the person gets extra strength. Is yurikahum Allahu fi manamika qalila walau arakahum kasiran lafashaltum wa latanazatum fil amri walakin Allah sallama innahu alimun bizatis sudur. Remember, God showed them to you in your dream as being few in numbers, and if they had been shown to you as being large in numbers, you would have lost hope and would have started quarreling amongst yourselves in this matter. But God saved you. Indeed, He always knows the secrets of the hearts. Now, the Prophet had a dream and he saw the enemy as being very few. And of course, he told his followers about it. This gave a lot of courage to the believers because they said, all right, if they're few, then we will be able to fight them bravely. And some people have interpreted this dream to mean that the enemy, even though large in numbers, they would prove to be a weak army. That's why it was shown as being few in numbers. And this would also give confidence to the believers. and not makes them lose hope or avoid the battle. According to Mujahid, who is a Tabai commentator, this dream encouraged the believers a great deal. I think we can stop now. So next time we will start with verse number 44 of Surah Al-Anfaal, that is the spoils of war, which is the 8th surah of the Quran. So let us do our little prayer. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وأدخلنا الجنة مع الأبرار يا عزيز يا غفار يا رب العالمين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين آمين ثم آمين. Thank you everyone for joining us, and inshallah we'll see you next week. Allah Hafiz.